r/AskReddit. What is something you have told the truth about but everybody thought you were lying? Was told for many years that my chronic pain, fatigue, migraines, and other symptoms were just in my head, and that I was just a silly woman looking for attention. Saw multiple specialists over the years, none of whom ever looked at my joints, and were very quick to dismiss me as a drug addict, despite having no history of addiction. Over time, my friends and family stopped believing me because I wasn't getting a diagnosis, and it was one of the loneliest, most depressing times of my life. Turns out I have Ehlers-Danlos syndrome. Found this out on my own because I was not going to take being a crazy person for an answer and kept doing my own research, since most doctors were useless and I had very little support. In fact, I was watching an episode of House where the patient had EDS, and I had never heard of the disorder, so I looked it up and realized I had many symptoms and had had many of them throughout my life. Got it confirmed by 2 geneticists. Unfortunately, it's still hard to get my pain and symptoms taken seriously, especially because little is known about this condition. Nearly every time I have to go to the emergency room, I have to spell out Ehlers-Danlos and explain to the doctors and nurses what the condition is, and then they have to go look it up, because EDS can affect how to properly proceed with treatments and procedures. I have a ton of drug allergies and sensitivities to things that people dismiss as me being picky or trying to be a special snowflake. My dad refuses to believe the geneticists and says I'm just looking for excuses not to work. So even with a DX, I still get treated like I'm lying. So my family rented The Ring shortly after it came out while I was home from college during a break. We chatted about it for the rest of the few days before I went back to school, so that it kind of became our thing over that break. Well, I head back to school, and the next time I call home or get an email from my parents or whatever, they're all of a sudden like, haha, real funny. When did you do that? Of course my only response was UHH. Say what now? But they weren't having any of it. After a long painstaking conversation that was every bit as annoying as one of those plot-driven misunderstandings on a TV show. Seriously, I had to demand what do you mean? So many times because they refused to believe I needed an explanation of what they were even talking about in the first place. I finally find out that after I arrived back at school, someone left a message on their home answering machine whispering 7 days. In a creepy Samara voice. Well, it wasn't me. OHH. But evidently I was very wrong. At least that's the story they held fast to 4 months. Definitely until the end of that entire school year, and possibly even into the summer beyond. Every time I came home again after that, someone would look at me all smugly and ask, so you're still not going to admit that was you on the phone? No matter how many times I maintained it wasn't me, or even started developing arguments like what motivation would I even have for playing dumb this long? If I'd played a joke on you, why wouldn't I want to be recognized for it? Every single member of the family remained stubbornly convinced that I was just playing some weird long con. I have to admit, I had no good explanation for it myself. Who else would call our family and leave an anonymous creepy horror movie threat on the phone? Until, several months later, one of my sister's friends nonchalantly told her, oh, that message on your phone. I totally forgot about that. Yeah, I did that after you told me you guys had watched the movie. And thus my name was cleared, though I'm sure that, as soon as they heard the explanation, my entire family conveniently forgot the story of how they had unjustly accused me for several months. Maybe not everybody, but it sure felt like it at the time. Found my backbone to get out of an abusive marriage after 10 years. Started compiling evidence after a particularly bad incident a couple of years prior, but still took a while to convince myself to get out. I've heard worse abuse stories, but he was making my life hell. Alcoholic, coke, controlling, had to be in constant contact with him. He would do things like pull me out of bed by my hair in the middle of the night, force sex on me, tell me he was going to slit my throat. I'm good at making the best of things and sugarcoating things, plus hiding abuse is a well-known thing. I stupidly covered it up for years and went well out of my way to make it look like we were happy and everything was perfect. We have a kid and it was starting to affect my child. Finally there was a last straw moment and I finally saw the light and had my shit together enough that I went and got a restraining order, kicked him out, and filed for divorce. He instantly started crying victim and made me out to be an evil witch and lots of people took his side and didn't believe me. TL. Doctor, got out of abusive marriage. People didn't believe me. My skin is much thicker now and I know who my real friends are. That I didn't steal a cunt's money. I was chilling in school when suddenly a girl starts crying out of nowhere. She was panicking because she lost $20. Before I knew it the police were in the class and made everyone show them their backpacks. I passed the bag check and my teacher told me that I might as well clean my bag. So I went to the trash can and emptied all the junk out. I sat back down and what do you know? 1 minute later the girl miraculously found her money in the trash and I'm being told to get up by the police. I told them I didn't do it, but they ignored me and kept telling me to stop lying. My friends who I was talking to the whole time before the event broke out didn't believe me either. The whole class started telling me to stop lying and how stealing is not okay. After an extensive talk with the principal and the police I determined they didn't give a shit about anything I said. I was already guilty in their eyes, so I politely asked to go to the bathroom. I walked out the school and walked for 2 hours to my house because I wasn't dealing with that shit. The next day they called my dad and made him put me on the phone. My teacher called to apologize. The girl admitted she was lying. That pissed me off so much I decided to change schools. I was never seen again. Finn. When I was 11 it was the book fair day at school and my parents forgot to give me money for it. My dad had a habit of leaving his wallet with cash in the bathroom, so I took like $5 before catching the school bus. Got home and got in trouble for stealing. Totally fair. I was a golden child, never did anything wrong, and slipped up this one time because I wanted a new book. Fast forward to a few weeks later I was going through this box of junk jewelry that was in my room and found this necklace with a half moon on it. It was pretty dainty and on a small gold chain. I didn't think much of it, assumed it was just from a yard sale or something, and put it on. After a few days of wearing it my mom noticed, asked me where I got it, and I told her. Turns out it was like 14k gold or something like that, and she accused me of stealing it. We live in the woods. I don't know when she thought I went to a store without her. There are no stores that I could get to without driving. I insisted I found it in the junk box and she didn't believe me because of that $5 I stole. I ended up confessing because she told me I couldn't have my friend over during March break if I didn't apologize. A few weeks later I was crying in my room about the incident and she came in and asked me what was wrong. I told her that I didn't steal it and I was upset because she didn't believe me and she ended up saying something like we can forget about it now because now I know you're truly sorry. I ended up snapping the moon in half on the necklace because it made me so upset every time I looked at it. I didn't even like the stupid thing, I just found it and thought it was junk. I might be carrying a bit of resentment. There is a legend in my circle that I puked in a Christmas tree. I didn't, but no one has ever believed me. In my younger days I was a notorious drunk. Every party I went to, there was a 75% I would be blackout drunk before it was over. So my buddy held this rocking Christmas party, and as expected I got my drink on. About midway through the party, another buddy of mine and a friend of hers scooped up a fifth of vodka and proceeded to destroy it in under 10 minutes. Well, the vodka didn't get along with all of the beer already in my stomach and they started to duke it out. I had just enough time to get to the front door and projectile vomit from the doorway to the outside. Now, the Christmas tree was right next to the door, and while I was throwing up, someone shouted, "That dude is puking in the Christmas tree." Now, I would have clarified that I wasn't, but the alcohol tsunami inside of me directed slink off and find a quiet place to die. A few hours later I woke up, angry that I was still alive, and therefore feeling like hammered shit. I went back to the party to begin drinking again. As soon as people saw me, all they wanted to talk about was me puking in the tree, which I emphatically denied, but I guess my wobbly, slurring speech wasn't very convincing. Now, at this point you're probably thinking, well, why didn't you just show them the tree and prove there was no vomit in it? That's a good point, and one I certainly would have brought up by the sober morning. Unfortunately, another friend of mine decided to pick a fight with the gingerbread house that our host had put together. Our host then threw a cake at my friend. In short order, every bit of food and drink readily available was thrown by anyone still capable. During this sudden eruption of food warfare, the tree was knocked over and pretty much destroyed, along with my alibi. I've never been able to convince anyone who was there that night that I didn't puke in the tree. Shit, I've had people who weren't there make fun of me for puking in the tree. When I told teachers and other school staff my mother was beating my brother and me. / Men don't have monopoly on physical abuse. Edit. I'm mostly okay now. Extreme and prolonged abuse is positively correlated with autoimmune conditions, and I coincidentally have several of those crippling me and making life very difficult. But aside from being sick and poor, I'm quite happy, and I have friends and family that are loving and supportive. Guys, positively correlated could mean nothing. Let's be clear. I'm not claiming they're related, they just might be, and for extra confirmation bias, I had both. This one hit me the most of all of them here. When I was 9 and my sister was 7, we were smacked so hard that bruises were left on us. My sister was brave enough to go to the head teacher and tell her. They called our mum in for a chat. We sat down in a room. 2 teachers, her and my sister, and we felt safe, and we told them everything. Mum tried to fight it, said she had bad moments, but she'd never hit us. Fast forward to being at home. She beat us properly. This time it was because we'd told on her and we weren't allowed to do it again. Some form of child protection people came out most days for a month, doing checks, making sure we were okay. Mum didn't beat us for a while because she knew they'd take us away if there was any evidence. It was decided she was a fit parent and nothing more happened. They went away and it continued. We gave up and just lived our lives as best we could. I didn't really go out. I've been really internal and only recently started coming out of my shell. I'm an adult now, but can't afford to move out currently. My job pays okay, but not enough for me to move. Sister escaped, left everything behind, found a lovely boyfriend, and moved somewhere cheap. We don't forgive, and we don't forget. She's had another child and thankfully she doesn't hit anymore. If she ever did, I would be here for my baby sister, and I wouldn't let her go through the shit the rest of us went through. Was bullied immensely when I was in middle school. No real particular reasons. I wasn't the smartest, or the funniest, or the most athletic. I was just little. I got belittled, teased for my interests and hobbies, how I dressed, and how I talked. There was nothing playful about it. It was straight up dragging me down and through the mud. Then the physical bullying began. Was literally shoved inside my locker because they wanted to see if I would fit. Was picked up by my throat and groin and shoved in a garbage can multiple times. Tried to tell the school counselor and principal. Both just asked what I did to provoke them and was told that I should just try to avoid them in our tiny school that housed elementary, middle, and high school all in one building. I'm 26 for reference, just a really small town school. Bullies found out, and that was the first time I had my nose broken at recess. Tried to tell my parents. They didn't believe it was as bad as I was saying it was. I was 12 and dramatic, they thought. Grades started to slip. Quit sports, dreaded going to school, got depressed, told my parents I didn't feel right, felt sick and didn't want to go to school. They said it was just puberty, it's a phase that will pass. Felt like nobody was listening or cared, so I put a shotgun in my mouth and pulled the trigger, and it didn't go off. Then people started taking it seriously. Still got bullied, school staff never did help. Bullies all graduated ahead of me, so my last 2 years of high school were good. got into counseling, meds for a few years, to control the panic attacks, and help me sleep. Still see a counselor every now and then to help with old issues and new. Bullying isn't fun. It made my young life hell, and I don't tolerate anyone being bullied to this day. It's made even worse when nobody wants to believe it's happening. Back in April I had the most excruciating pain in my abdomen I have ever felt in my life. Can't even come up with words to describe it. Went to 3 separate doctors who told me I had a virus and I was exaggerating / had a low pain tolerance. My entire family said the same. Flash forward to 2 weeks later, I'm having emergency surgery cause turns out I had an autoimmune disease that was attacking my large intestine. It was so last minute my intestine had already broken and practically disintegrated. What followed was septic shock, a coma, and 2 resuscitations. Flash forward 3 weeks later, the doctors are telling me they are moving me out of the ICU, and I'm begging them not to because I still don't feel any better. Again, you're exaggerating, you're being negative, your mindset influences your physical state, until I begged them to do another cord scan and they did. Turns out I had huge abscesses that the antibiotics weren't getting to, 2 more operations and 3 more weeks in the ICU. I was 11 years old and attending boarding school. I started feeling a bit stiff and sore like I overdid exercise, but it continued to worsen. By the end of the week it was quite painful, so I went to the school matron to ask what was up. She looked at me and said I was fine and sent me on my way with a Strepsil. It continued to worsen over the next few days and I continued to see the matron for help. Fast forward another 2 weeks and I was pretty much unable to walk. I had to lean on the wall as I walked for support. I could hardly dress myself. Not only did the matron think I was acting up because she thought I disliked boarding school, the other kids made my life miserable. My parents didn't believe me as they were taking the matron's advice. She did eventually allow me to see the local doctor, but she had already told him I was just acting and not to believe a word I said. He told me there was nothing wrong with me. Not until the summer holidays when went to visit my aunt did someone say something wasn't right. My aunt's husband is a vet and said the way I walked couldn't really be faked by a kid and showed signs of severe pain. So after 4 months of needless pain and suffering, my parents bring me to my doctor, who takes a blood test. It comes back that I have severe inflammation in line with rheumatoid arthritis. I start seeing a rheumatologist, but a lot of joint and psychological damage had already been done. My matron still didn't believe me. Bitch. Finding a dead body at the bottom of a swimming pool. This happened when I was a kid in Hong Kong, about 1993. HMS Tama was the Navy's base, and the pool there was basically occupied by kids during the long hot summer, with the adults hanging around at the pool's edge. I was nuts about going underwater, so used to swim down at the bottom, something most people never did. Anyway, I was swimming along the bottom and suddenly I come across the prone body of this kid called Gareth. I knew his brother, and, thinking he was doing some early 90s version of planking, sunk down and lay next to him on the pool floor. I totally expected him to hit me, but he didn't. He just lay there. So I poked him. Still lay there. Shook him. Still lay there. At this point I realized what was going on and grabbed him and hauled him out of the water, yelling for help. The pool was full of people, but for some reason most of them hadn't seen the kid. The lifeguard on duty had dived in and grabbed him from me as I hauled him out. So there I am, a 10-year-old, watching as a lifeguard takes this kid and puts him on the side of the pool, giving him full CPR. The kid splutters to life. Off he goes to the hospital, and the whole pool is shocked. It later emerged that he'd been running along the side of the pool and slipped in, knocking himself out. So we are all sitting there, and I'm sat next to this kid called Aaron. And I start telling him what happened, and he insists no, he was the one who got help. He saw the kid, got the lifeguard. And I'm thinking this is crap. Then the adults start lecturing us on how Aaron had been so brave and heroic, and how he was a hero that had saved Gareth's life. And I'm sat there thinking, what the hell? I just pulled that kid out of the water. What had happened, of course, is that we'd both acted. Aaron had been on the side and seen Gareth through the water and told the lifeguard. Simultaneously, I'd started hauling Gareth out of the water, handing him off to the lifeguard. Aaron got a bike as a reward and grateful thanks from parents. I got called a liar at school. It's one of those weird memories where everything about it is miserable, but I'm still glad I did it. That I was adopted. When my world history class came around, we had to do this genetics background project and trace ancestry. We were to put the countries our ancestors came from, then trace our family trees back, as we were going to relate various parts of history to our family trees. Only thing on my project was Germany, Italy, Lithuania. No family tree. See, this had to be our genetic lines we were tracing. If you saw my adopted parents, you'd say I look perfectly like a cross between the two and 100% look like I have to be my brother's sister. I was however adopted as a baby in a closed adoption. All we know of my family is that my dad was a German citizen visiting the US and hooked up with my mom, who was a second generation Italian American who had Lithuanian in her blood, which for some reason she chose to share with my parents. When they met at the hospital after delivery, the teacher made a big deal of the fact my project wasn't done and tried to embarrass me in front of the class. Other students had seen a picture of my family, part of the project, and a few that cared agreed I was lying. I was pretty demoralized and feeling pretty shitty about myself. It's already hard enough at doctors' offices and whatnot to be able to provide zero medical background. Mom was pretty pissed off when I told her I failed the assignment and called the teacher to inform them that I do in fact have zero knowledge of my genetic background beyond what I wrote. Teacher apologized in class the next day. Edit. Just got one of those ancestry kits for a late Christmas present and I'm about to send it in. I'm kind of excited to learn a bit more about the people that brought me here. Edit 2. Wanted to mention that we were required to only add blood relatives. Not even step family was allowed. That I'm full on allergic to fish. If I eat it my throat closes and I dry heave and writhe around on the ground until I fall asleep or it passes. I know that's a ridiculous lack of preparedness. I now have an EpiPen. This has happened to me about a half dozen times in my life, often when I'm alone and eat something without checking the ingredients, and the other couple times I excused myself because I didn't want to ruin people's meals. Also stupid. I know medical attention is the proper course of action, but most recently we were at a resort in Mexico. I've been through it before, and I trusted I could go wait out the storm in my room. Anyways, everyone thinks I just don't like fish and say I'm allergic, and it kills me because sushi looks delicious. People love it. I have no idea what it tastes like. Why would I choose to not be able to enjoy these things? Or fish and chips? Are you kidding me? It's the meat so tender I see people cut it with their fork. I want to try that, but I can't. Anyways, last year a couple of my buddies and I were drunk, and they snuck some fish into my food, thinking I wouldn't notice and that in half an hour's time, when I haven't had a reaction, they could oust me as a fraud. My throat promptly closed. Brunch was ruined, and they had to rush me to get medical help as well as cover the bill, which was about $150 as we're in Canada. They believe me now. About 2 years ago my wife and I were chilling at home, getting high and playing games. We had cut up a mango to eat, but it wasn't very ripe, so the flesh was still quite firm. I was sitting there playing TF2, I think, when all of a sudden I hear a gagging choking noise coming from my wife. I turn around, and sure enough she was choking on a piece of mango, grasping her throat with her eyes wide open in shock. At first I started patting her on the back, but it wasn't helping. So I pulled her out of her chair and did the Heimlich maneuver, just as I was taught it. I was surprised when the chunk of mango popped out on the first try. She took a moment to catch her breath, but after that we were both laughing about just what happened. I got her a drink, and then we went back to playing games and we didn't talk about that for the rest of the night. The next day I brought it up, and she had no recollection of it. She thought I was making it up. If I still bring it up she'll tell people that I made it up. I can't recall exactly what it was I was getting yelled at for. Dishes not being put up. An object that shouldn't have been put away. Something of that sort. My mother was screaming at me and I was explaining that I had no idea what she was talking about. I hadn't moved anything I wasn't supposed to. Just to hear myself over her, I'd have to keep raising my voice higher and higher. She was still screeching over my little voice. She refused to believe me. My grandmother shrugged and said she didn't know one way or another. I'm pleading my case, but my mother is mad. She backhands me across the face, smacks my leg and leaves a massive red handprint that's swelling. I run off to my room and cry. Everyone leaves me alone and in pain for about an hour. It's quiet as I finally stop crying when my mother slinks into my room. She apologizes and says she found whatever it was and she simply forgot she had moved it somewhere else. I was 4 or 5. This happened more than once. I can't forget that shit. Back in high school, a history teacher gave me a failing grade for consistently not turning in my homework. She didn't like that I was too smart for my own good, so she threw it out and claimed I didn't do it. As I wasn't known for working all that hard in school, no one believed me when I told them I was doing the work. Hell, I was getting the work done in a matter of minutes. This teacher was pretty much retired in place and was giving us simple worksheets that just required you to find and copy some keywords from the textbook and you were done. The next year she did the exact same thing to a number of other students whose parents believed them, and she was immediately removed from the classroom, and she spent the next decade working the system to keep from being fired. The school district had to pay her to come in and not do any work, but couldn't fire her as she came into work every day. They finally had to give her a full pension and a large cash settlement to leave. My own parents thought I was lying, and I was punished by them for not doing the work, but punished worse for lying about it. And when the teacher was found out a year later, no one, not my parents, not the school, no one at all, ever tried to make things right, or even gave me a word of apology. It took me a very long time to get over that. Thank you so much for watching the whole video. Please leave a like and subscribe.